on to our next session of the day, that is on red teaming, going beyond checkbox exercises and creating real value. And for this, I would like to call upon stage Mr. Bhowmik Shah, who is a co-founder and CTO with CyberNX. To give a brief background, Bhowmik is a skilled professional in the cybersecurity domain known for effectively translating complex technical risk landscapes into strategic business aligned solutions. He excels in driving collaboration across cross functional teams and fostering proactive security. Let's welcome him with a huge round of applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bhowmik. I'm going to talk about red teaming. I'm unable to mirror my screen, so you'll probably see everything very small. Feel free to ask me questions, I'll clarify. Uh, I'm from CyberNX. We are a cert empaneled vendor and we do a lot of offensive security activities. And a lot of times what happens is we have a fly on the wall perspective when it comes to decision making when people talk about carrying out penetration testing or red teaming or any of those offensive security activities. And a lot of times what happens is those decisions uh, are very ad hoc. A lot of them are driven from a regulatory perspective. A lot of them are driven by the person at the helm and depending on their mood. And as a partner, we don't really have a lot of input into advising them on how we should go about it. So I'm going to use this forum to help you understand our perspective on where red teaming exercises go wrong and how you all as customers can make more effective use of red teaming engagements that you do. Right? So that's the agenda for today. I have no idea if that is visible, but that's just the agenda. I'll switch to the context. But see, what happens with red teaming is a lot of organizations tend to look at red teaming from a compliance perspective. The regulator has said that you've done your VA, you've done your PT, you've done your hardening assessment, you have to do red teaming twice a year. You have to do continuous red teaming, right? I mean, that's the flavor of the season. And you'll be surprised the number of times I get asked that, can you deliver a red teaming report in a week? I don't have much time. We take more time to do a penetration test activity. So a lot of it is compliance driven. What we generally see is, forget the numbers. I could put any numbers over there and you'll probably not take my word for it. But more than half of these activities end up being glorified penetration tests. You get a report which is a little more granular than a penetration test report. Think of the exams where you get marks based on how much you write. So instead of a 12-page report, you have a 20-page report. You've got fancy diagrams, but no real context within the report, right? There's no business focused risk that people look at, and that's one area where we tend to spend a lot of time, because at the end of the day what you're trying to do is you're trying to find out if your business is susceptible or vulnerable to threat actors from the outside, and if yes, then how easily or how difficult is it for them to get in. With this table, let's look at two different red teaming engagements. But keep scrolling, but on the right over here, I have a basic set of objectives. They're technical objectives. You typically see them, your red teaming partner will come and say, look, we'll compromise your Active Directory, we'll exfiltrate your data, we'll gain initial access, we'll gain access to your mailbox. These are all technical activities, right? Your penetration test should also typically cover all of these. From a business perspective, your CRO will not really value if a pen tester or a red teamer comes and says, oh, I found a time-based SQL injection in your SQL database and I was able to extract your database character by character without triggering a single alert in your SIM. Right? That doesn't hold business context for them. What holds business context for your executive team, your CRO, your CEO is there reputational damage? These are the questions that we get asked. Straightforward, no fluff, fully blunt and brutal questions that I get asked when we are talking to executive leadership is, how vulnerable is my core employee data? How vulnerable is my transaction workflow? How vulnerable is my approval workflow? Now, all of this have never come into the conversation when we are finalizing red teaming engagements. They're all driven by, oh, I want to do an internal red team, I want to do an external red team. Do you do physical red teaming? Yes. Can we do an assumed breach scenario? Yes. Leave out these 20 people from my organization. They have leave out the CEO, leave out the CFO, leave out the CRO, leave out their executive assistants. Do not fish them. Do not touch their systems. Everything else is available. but then you're already starting off on a stunted premise, right? So how do you actually leverage people's susceptibility, where these people are in positions of power and positions of trust? So your phishing exercises typically tend to focus on the lower rung, who may not have enough privilege, enough access, they may not have enough visibility into your systems, right? Now, how do you build a set of red teaming objectives which eventually add value, right? So on the left here, I've got advanced business focused objectives, which we've actually done for a few clients, right? The first one, again, a lot of these are within the BFSI sector. We had one client who came to us and said, we've had an incident on our APIs which are connected with a mobile app, and we want to see how bad is it. So they actually asked us to do a pen test for their APIs. We said, when was the last time you did a pen test? They said, about a month and a half back. And we got a full green report, no vulnerabilities, nothing. We said, that's not going to help you. Allow us to compromise your APIs. You have a pre-prod environment, we'll hit the pre-prod. If you have prod, we'll hit the prod, we'll do it out of business hours, so you don't have impact, right? We did manage to compromise their transactional workflow, their APIs, their authentication mechanism. We were able to bypass their OTP. They had mail-based and SMS-based OTPs, which means if I have the user ID, I can actually brute force into somebody's broking account, make trades. If they have like a lot of demat accounts are linked to your bank accounts, I can actually make a transaction directly from your bank account. And we were able to bypass all of this. And they did not have poor security. It was just a business logic flaw that we managed to identify. Another category over here, we actually did some work for an insurance company. This was red teaming, and we managed to buy a term life insurance policy worth 5 crores for 5 rupees. 5 rupees because they did not allow us to go below 5 rupees. So this policy, which typically would have cost anywhere between 25 to 30,000, we were able to buy it for 5 rupees. To top it off, my red teamer actually got a call from the contact center asking how you experienced buying the policy online, right? So now this tends to wake people up. This is the kind of outcome that you're looking for when you do a red teaming activity. You're not looking for SSL vulnerabilities, TLS vulnerabilities, no content security policy, HSTS missing. You're not looking for those things. What do I have? I have one more interesting thing. The last two bits that you see, right? I'll talk a bit more about that. But IR capabilities, a lot of people don't test. They generally do not look at incident response as a part of the red teaming activity, which is a big miss. You're doing a red team exercise. Why are you not testing if your incident response team is aware of what they're supposed to do, how they are supposed to react, who they're supposed to mobilize, what tools are they supposed to use? Same goes for your detection teams, your SOC, your SIM. They don't really know what they're looking for, and at the end of the day, what happens is those teams get a red flag saying you do not detect anything, right? So how do you actually convert this? In practice, designing your red team activity for what is the right word? If you want to do red teaming with a more business specific approach, the amount of effort involved from your end is not too high. If you see over here, a typical scope or the level of complexity required is not very high. We've got technical objectives, we've got business objectives. What is required is a certain depth in understanding where your business risks lie and what do you want tested, right? So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I've actually got, sorry. I will, let me see if I can do this. So here what I'm trying to show is the scope and complexity do not vary a lot, right? The success rate varies significantly. You start off with basic technical objectives, almost every red teaming partner will be able to show you a beautiful report. They'll be able to compromise a lot of things. That's the state of the infra these days that we currently come across. You may not have a very heavy success rate from a business impact perspective, but that is what you're really looking for. You're not looking for an attacker who can identify an FTP port. You're looking for an attacker who can identify a plain text FTP port, use that as a pivot point to get inside your environment, and then do lateral movement, reach your database, and then exfiltrate your database. Right? But that's the extent that you want to go to. Here, the business relevance here, this is where you start seeing the difference, With the basic red teaming activity, you get a nice red report, you can show it, you can say, I've got a roadmap for the next 6 months, lots to fix. But the business relevance here is not a lot. You could have achieved the same by carrying out 6 penetration tests a year instead of 3 or 4, right? What you're really looking for is highly relevant, highly focused business risk which will have a direct financial or reputational impact to your organization. I mean, everybody's been walking around since morning. Everybody's been talking to each other. Dark web is a serious threat. There's tons of data on the dark web. Today morning, I got a notification from Have I Been Pawned that my credentials have shown up on a Synthient breach. I don't know how many of you would have received that. This was a breach that happened in April. They have my password from that time. So I had a 13-character password and for OTP and everything. But they had everything, right? So a lot of this information is available. It is a gold mine. The way we can leverage this information, and I talk about it in one of the case studies that I speak about, is just insane. There's so much potential with all of this information, but we're not really looking at that. We're straight away doing a DNS recon. We identify what your external attack surface area is. We start hitting all the ports. We do an nmap scan. We find something, then we find a web application. We try and then we move on to a web application attack. That's really not what a red team is supposed to be, right? So the relevance that you get with business-focused use cases is far more than what you would get with basic objectives. More importantly, as I said, nobody looks at your detection capabilities. How many of these activities a good red team exercise will typically go for 90 days or more? You have a large window of opportunity to identify what is being thrown out by your SOC. Right? Do you have the right alerts? Do you have use cases? Do you have criticality defined? Do you have visibility into which layer weaknesses are present? Right? No, nobody. I'll tell you, this year we've done about 13 red team activities so far. Only one customer has come back and asked us, can you come back and help my SOC team figure out why they were not able to detect everything that you did? And we managed to compromise their entire AWS environment. We downloaded customer KYC data, Aadhaar card, PAN card, contract notes. We managed to literally get access to everything, right? And this wasn't even, we did not have to write custom exploits. It was just poor identity hygiene, right? So these are some areas that you don't really look at. So how am I doing for time? I don't have time, so I'll skip this. But for financial services, a quick 1-minute summary. Financial services firm, they had a lot of APIs, had integrations with payment gateways, they had their own internal APIs which were used for a lot of analysis and research and everything. We managed to, they had a massive external attack surface area. We identified about 1,500 odd domains in their DNS. I mean, that's not a vulnerability per se, it's just a very large attack surface area. More than 70 of those domains had expired. So a lot of domains had purchased for brand protection. They just had landing pages and things over there. But we found 70 valid domains which had expired, which were still present within their DNS. We were also able to purchase those domains. We purchased those domains. Now I have a domain which is present in my customer's environment. I can do whatever I want. I hosted a dummy website for them. I started sending out emails. Some of them got caught, some of them landed in the inbox. The second thing that we did over here was we found a breach data set which had credentials for their employees. Now, the customer had told us very confidently that MFA is enforced uniformly. We found a breach data set. We had about 150 odd credentials that we identified, which were for current employees. It was a much larger data set. We hit the mother load when we found about 6 or 7 employees who did not have MFA enabled. They had passwords as simple as company@1234 underscore 2025. Long enough, but very simple to guess. We managed to log into an inbox. We found a VPN configuration file. We were able to connect to their VPN. We were inside their environment. We had access to the database. We had access to the file store. We had access to an internal WhatsApp group which had photos that were being shared of KYC documents by field agents. And once we were there, it was basically game over. We just needed time to slowly exfiltrate data out. We downloaded a 5 gig file, no eyebrows raised. Nobody said anything. And then we sort of pulled out the CISO's personal details and everything, and we showcased it to them, right? But it also takes a certain kind of customer to be able to allow us to do this. A lot of CISOs are very hesitant because they do not have complete visibility into how effective their controls are, right? So that's the financial services case study that we did. But how this so this is typically how a real threat actor would actually flow in. I'm running out of time, so I won't go through this. But they won't start off with an nvat scan, and they won't run they won't run, I don't know, one of those open source web application security tools against your app just to see what they find, or they'll do a manual test, or they'll go to exploit DB and find something. No, they'll have a much more simpler attack simulation workflow depending on what they find. It's going to be opportunistic. It's not going to be comprehensive. The moment they find something, they're going to use everything in their power, including the fact that they will buy credentials off the dark web if required, because it's not about proving whether I'm technical enough, it's about proving whether I can get in, right? So that's what attackers are typically looking for. But how do you turn this around, right? So this is what we see. And a lot of times what happens is when we deliver reports, we ourselves are not satisfied. The team says, look, this could be better. If you wouldn't have asked me to do this in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I could have done a far better job. But then that's how it is. Come March, next quarter will be very crazy for us because we will have all customers lining up. I need a report. I need a closure report in 4 weeks. I need a closure report in a week, and things like that, right? Business logic tracks. I'll skip this, but this is interesting. From a detection engineering perspective, a lot of red teaming activities rely on basic techniques for persistence. And I am not sure if you're able to see those numbers over there, but if you see those percentages for all of this, so living off the land is just having PowerShell scripts or WMI scripts that are running, and then you use them and trigger them as and when you need. They have an 85% success ratio in evading detection mechanisms, because they typically come from normal accounts, and they appear to be like normal activities, and SIM rules do not factor that in. The other one, memory only, SIMs are becoming smarter about that, but timing based evasion, you know, I'm sure everybody's heard statistics about an attacker has been within your environment for an average of 6 months before they start, showing signs. But that is really true. And a good attacker will not only mine your environment for data that they can exfiltrate and hold you to ransom for, they will also hold your environment to ransom. We faced a few cases where a customer's environment had been compromised. Multiple end user machines from branch locations, where typically the security is weaker, they were compromised, and the customer was not able to get back. The threat actor was not able to find a pathway back to the HQ or the data center. So what they did was they actually put up an entire network of machines on the dark web for lease. Here is compute power. I will charge you X amount of money. You have administrative access. You give me a script. I will be able to run the script. You want to launch a DDoS against the website. I'll be able to do that. $100 for 2 hours. That is how attackers are monetizing, access. It isn't always about data. I mean, data is the crown jewel, but access also matters a lot, right? So that timing-based evasion also, you will have, and that is why things like threat hunting matter. So when you're doing red teaming, also leverage that to figure out how you can build hypotheses for carrying out much targeted threat hunting activities, right? Legitimate service and all is fairly standard, but do this. How do you improve red teaming for detection engineering? So of course, you need to know what your baseline detection is. The most commonly important. We have so many organizations who don't know what is there in their environment in terms of domains or IPs or ports or services or tools that are being used, and that's just chaotic. For a CISO, if I was in that CISO shoe, it would give me panic attacks, because I don't know what I'm trying to protect. What kind of a budget or manpower or skill or capability should I go and ask for, right? So I won't go through all of that, but basically have a baseline. When you run the red teaming activity, request your red teaming partner to actually build a set of hypotheses that they're running, and ask them that, what should the SOC detect out of this? Even if it appears as a legitimate activity, what should show up? It could be a threshold, it could be an out of business hours activity, or something like that, right? That will help you identify how many activities were detected, how many went undetected, how many new TTPs do you have which you haven't accounted for in your SIM, right? Once you do this, run through the findings again and see if your detection has improved. Your alert fatigue should have reduced, your alert count should have reduced. Right now, I think a SOC is the only place where the bell curve does not apply or the bell curve shifts right, right? The highest number of alerts that most people will be getting will fall within the medium and low category, not even high and medium. So if we see critical high, medium, low, the bell actually shifts towards medium and low. And that is noise. That is basically a time sink for your operations teams because they're chasing, I don't know, wild geese within your environment where when it's the illusion of doing something without having real impact, right? So use that to improve your detection engineering, but also define KPIs. Sorry, I'm taking a little more time, but define KPIs, it's very important. You need to know what you expect out of this. So obviously detection engineering is something that I've harped on for the last 20 minutes, but it's very important. You've already paid for the service. Extract maximum value out of it. Look at your team readiness. A lot of times, larger enterprises, in one of my earlier roles, I was saddled with the responsibility of being a fire warden for my floor. I was a fire warden for 3 years. I did 6 training activities where, here's the exit, get people in a single file, when a fire happens, wet towels and how do you go down, where's the, collection area and everything. There wasn't a single fire. Nobody lit a agarbatti on the floor, okay? Your incident response is like that. When a true incident happens, the person in charge is probably traveling for Diwali to their remote hometown in a bus with patchy network and a laptop that is out of battery. Who is the fallback? Who steps in? We had a case. Somebody had actually uploaded a code with not just an AWS access key secret key, but a JWT token onto a Postman collection which was public. This happened last year around New Year's. When we tried to reach out to that person, the customer, obviously set up a war room, everybody from India, from Philippines, and from US, and everybody got into the war room. They identified the engineer whose account it was. The engineer had no laptop. They had patchy network. They were not able to log into Postman. They did not remember the Postman password because it was stored in a password manager on their laptop. And reaching out to Postman to help remove something doesn't work. Sorry, before they kick me off, but this is it. I think the key takeaway is squeeze out value out of red team. Don't make it a glorified pen test. Use it for what it is. It should be the final frontier after you've done your config reviews, your hardening assessments, your VA, your PT, and then you give somebody carte blanche to sort of go into your environment and do what they are able to do. All right, I'm getting off.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank
your
you.
wonderful insights.